The sky was bruised with twilight as the International Council gathered, each official heavy with unease. Earth's leaders, military minds, and scientists had come together in the highest security room in the United Nations, sealed from the outside world. News of the alien fleet's sudden arrival had swept the planet like wildfire, and now no one could pretend it was a hoax. This was happening. An advanced extraterrestrial civilization had come, and their intentions were still cloaked in mystery. In the conference room, men in suits exchanged tense glances, while armed guards lined the walls. Among them stood General Mark Roberts, a man in his 50s whose rigid stance and penetrating gaze projected calm despite the situation. He had a face weathered by years of military service, yet his eyes were sharp, calculating. Beside him was Dr. Alan Fisher, a lean, slightly stooped scientist with keen intelligence behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Known for his expertise in xenobiology, he had been pulled from his lab at midnight, hardly able to believe what he was witnessing. The lights dimmed. A metallic hum echoed as the doors hissed open and the room fell silent. Entering with deliberate steps was the alien delegate, his towering figure encased in a metallic suit that shimmered with strange, iridescent patterns. The alien's skin was smooth and pale, his large, obsidian-black eyes sweeping over the assembled humans with detached curiosity. His mouth, a thin slit, curled into something resembling a smile, though it carried no warmth. When he spoke, his voice was calm yet resonated unnervingly, the words flowing in perfect English with an accent that seemed engineered, uncanny in its precision. "Greetings, inhabitants of Earth. I am Veraclear, representative of the Zather Collective." The assembly held its breath. General Roberts cleared his throat, stepping forward with the confidence of a man accustomed to holding command. "On behalf of Earth's governments, I welcome you, Delegate Veraclear. We hope your arrival is one of peace and understanding." A low chuckle emanated from Veraclear, his alien lips curling further. "Peace?" he repeated, as if savoring the word. "How quaint." "No, General Roberts, I am not here to discuss peace. The Zather Collective has analyzed your species, your history, and determined you are a dangerous anomaly, a risk to galactic order." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dr. Fisher, unable to restrain his curiosity, stepped forward. "But we've done nothing to warrant a preemptive threat. We've barely ventured beyond our own solar system." Veraclear's gaze settled on him, and for a moment, Dr. Fisher felt as though he were an insect pinned under a magnifying glass. "You are a race ruled by aggression, driven by self-destruction, the records of your wars, your technologies of annihilation. Do you not see that your very nature makes you incompatible with galactic harmony?" "We are a diverse species," Fisher protested, "capable of change and progress. Judging us solely on our mistakes is a misinterpretation of our potential." "Potential?" Veraclear scoffed, his black eyes narrowing. "That potential is precisely what concerns us. Left unchecked, humans could spread their chaos across the stars. We have seen it before. Species who promised enlightenment and brought only ruin." General Roberts stiffened, his fists clenching. "So, you're here to eradicate us?" The word hung heavy, causing the room to collectively hold its breath. "Not eradicate," Veraclear replied, almost mockingly. "Control. We have come to impose order upon your species. Submission will be painless, resistance far less so." Ambassador Leonard Carter, the diplomat chosen to lead negotiations, finally broke his silence. A calm, silver-haired man with a reputation for his reasoned temperament, he spoke with measured urgency. "Delegate Veraclear, surely there is another way. We are willing to cooperate, to understand your conditions. There is no need for hostility." Veraclear's expression remained unmoved. "Conditions are non-negotiable. You have 24 hours to prepare for compliance. After that, the Zather Collective will act." His gaze swept over the room, his tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Consider it mercy." The word landed like a blow, and a murmur of disbelief filled the room. The alien delegate's calm, unblinking stare made it clear. He didn't see them as equals, but rather as misguided children in need of correction. General Roberts spoke with a low, steely resolve. "We will not bow so easily." Veraclear arched an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Your defiance is expected, though pointless. You would do well to consider the history of those who defied the collective. Your species will join them or perish alongside them." The alien turned on his heel and began to stride out, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. The officials watched, torn between fear and fury. Dr. Fisher adjusted his glasses, his mind racing with thoughts of what this meant for humanity. As the doors closed, Ambassador Carter looked around the room, searching for a glimmer of hope. "Gentlemen, we have less than 24 hours to make a decision. If we stand any chance of survival, we must consider every option, diplomatic and defensive alike." General Roberts's voice was grim. "Diplomacy has already failed. It's clear the Zathras see us as a threat they intend to eliminate or enslave." Dr. Fisher, his face pale but determined, spoke up. "Then we must show them humanity's resilience. If not through words, then through actions." The men exchanged looks, a heavy sense of duty weighing on each of them. They had no choice now. Earth's fate lay in their hands, and surrender was not an option. In the silence that followed, the gravity of their task settled heavily on their shoulders. As the minutes ticked away, they knew they were about to face the most formidable enemy humanity had ever encountered. The conference room buzzed with tension as Earth's leaders regrouped to form a plan. An hour had passed since the alien delegate's chilling departure, and the gravity of his ultimatum weighed heavily on every man in the room. General Mark Roberts stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his face set in a scowl as he scanned the solemn faces around him. "All right, gentlemen," he began, his voice firm. "We have less than 23 hours until the Zathras launch their invasion. They expect us to cower or surrender. I, for one, have no intention of giving them the satisfaction." Dr. Alan Fisher, his fingers nervously tapping a pen against the table, looked up from his hastily scribbled notes. "General, the Zathras' technology far surpasses ours. We're dealing with a civilization that has crossed stars to reach us, one that sees humanity as a pest to be controlled. How can we hope to match that?" Roberts shot him a hard look. "We have more than weapons, Doctor. Humanity's resilience has been tested time and again, and we've survived everything that's been thrown at us. I don't intend to let these extraterrestrial tyrants decide otherwise." The men around the table nodded, though uncertainty shadowed their expressions. Ambassador Leonard Carter, sitting across from Roberts, cleared his throat, his voice calm but insistent. "While I share your resolve, General, our options are severely limited. Diplomatic solutions may seem like a faint hope, but it's all we have. A hasty act of aggression could bring us to ruin. Diplomacy?" Roberts replied, his tone sharp. "Veraclear made it clear he isn't here to negotiate. They want submission, Ambassador, not dialogue. We're dealing with a species that sees itself as our overseer, not our ally." Dr. Fisher adjusted his glasses and interjected, "There may be one way to level the playing field, however slim. We know almost nothing about their capabilities. If we can gather intelligence on their technology, we might uncover a vulnerability. But the risks of espionage against a species this advanced are—" "Necessary risks," Roberts interrupted, his voice resolute. "They've given us no choice. We'll need someone who can operate in hostile territory, a strategist capable of thinking outside the box." The room fell silent as the men considered the implications. Then, Ambassador Carter's gaze shifted to a figure who had remained quiet until now, a man seated at the far end of the table, his arms crossed and his face impassive. Captain Daniel Mason, a decorated space pilot with a reputation for unconventional tactics, met Carter's look with a nod. His presence was unassuming, but his eyes, keen and calculating, held a glint of fierce determination. "Captain Mason," Carter began, "you've faced the unknown before. What are your thoughts on an operation to infiltrate the Zather fleet? Mason leaned forward, his voice calm, but edged with a cold pragmatism. If we're serious about resistance, we'll need to hit them where they don't expect it. The Zather think of us as inferior, and that arrogance could be their weakness. They won't anticipate a coordinated strike from us, especially not one that exploits our adaptability. Roberts grunted, a hint of a smile breaking through his stern demeanor. What do you propose, Captain? Mason outlined his plan with steady confidence. Our best chance lies in a covert assault. If we can deploy a small team to infiltrate their command ship, we might be able to disable their central systems long enough to gain an edge. We have some experimental stealth technology that might let us slip past their defenses, assuming, of course, they're not familiar with our methods. Ambassador Carter's brow furrowed, skeptical yet intrigued. Are you suggesting we gamble Earth's survival on a stealth attack? Yes, Mason replied bluntly, his eyes unwavering. We're outmatched in every way, technology, firepower, numbers. But they underestimate us. If we can keep them guessing, disrupt their organization, it could buy us time to prepare a stronger counterattack. It's a long shot, but it's the best one we have. Dr. Fisher's face lit up with cautious optimism. If we succeed in disabling even part of their systems, it could prevent them from launching a full-scale invasion. But the risk is astronomical, and we'll need to move quickly. General Roberts nodded, his expression grave but resolute. Then we proceed. I'll assemble our finest operatives for this mission. Captain Mason, you'll lead the team. Gather what you need, and make sure every man is prepared to face whatever the Zather throw at us. Ambassador Carter leaned forward, his gaze serious. One thing is certain. If this mission fails, Earth's defenses will be crippled, and any hope of diplomacy will be dead. We are entrusting you with humanity's last chance. Captain. Mason held Carter's gaze, his jaw set. I understand, sir. My men know the stakes, and we're prepared to see this through. The council members exchanged solemn looks, each of them aware of the weight that had just been placed on Mason's shoulders. General Roberts turned to address the room one final time. Gentlemen, the Zather believe they've already won. Let's prove them wrong. A murmur of agreement circled the table. The mood was grim but defiant, the men united by a fierce determination. Each understood that they were stepping into uncharted territory with everything to lose. Yet, in that moment, they also shared a common resolve. Earth would not go down without a fight. As the council members dispersed to prepare for the operation, Captain Mason remained seated for a moment, staring at the empty spot where the alien delegate had sat. Veraclear's cold smile and condescending words echoed in his mind, fueling his determination. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but the prospect of proving the Zather wrong, of defying their mercy, spurred him forward. Standing at last, Mason left the room with a sense of purpose. The countdown to humanity's most critical mission had begun, and he was ready to take the fight to their enemy, no matter the cost. Captain Daniel Mason walked briskly into the briefing room, where General Roberts, Dr. Fisher, and Ambassador Carter were waiting, their faces tense but expectant. Mason had spent the last few hours assembling his team and reviewing Earth's limited stealth technology, and he now had a daring plan to present, one that would be their only shot at averting the alien invasion. General Roberts, his eyes sharp and intense, nodded to Mason as he entered. Captain, you said you have a strategy? Mason took a deep breath, steadying himself before addressing the room. Yes, sir. It's risky, but given the Zather's arrogance and overconfidence, it might be exactly what we need. We'll use our stealth ship, the Vanguard, outfitted with experimental cloaking technology, to infiltrate the Zather fleet. Once inside, we'll target their command ship, disable their central control systems, and create a temporary disruption across their forces. Ambassador Carter's brow furrowed, his voice cautious. Disrupt their control systems? Captain, we barely understand their technology. Are you certain our team could even locate the right systems, let alone disable them? Dr. Fisher leaned forward, chiming in with a thoughtful nod. The Zather have likely centralized command protocols. It's efficient, but it's also a potential vulnerability. If we can access their core systems, even a short disruption could throw their invasion off balance, giving us valuable time. General Roberts' mouth curled into a slight smile, impressed. So, you're banking on the Zather's overconfidence and reliance on a single command structure. I like it. Bold, direct, and unexpected, but incredibly dangerous, Carter added, his tone wary. What you're proposing would require a near-perfect execution. And if the cloaking fails, or the Zather detect our presence, there'll be no second chances. Mason met Carter's gaze without flinching. I understand, Ambassador. This mission demands precision, but my team is prepared. We'll approach the command ship in complete silence, using the Vanguard's cloaking abilities to avoid detection. Once on board, our tech specialists will locate the command core, and we'll plant electromagnetic pulse charges to temporarily disable their network. Dr. Fisher's eyes lit up with an idea. An EMP. If timed right, it could create a chain reaction, momentarily disabling their systems and disrupting communication across the fleet. General Roberts nodded, his approval clear. Then it's settled. Captain Mason, your team will have our support. I'll ensure you have the equipment and men you need. Mason nodded, resolute. But as he looked around, he could sense the gravity of the situation settling over each man in the room. The Zather were an advanced and ruthless foe, and their collective threat loomed heavily over this desperate plan. Yet, there was also a glimmer of hope, something they hadn't had since the alien delegate's arrival, a small but powerful possibility of survival. Ambassador Carter folded his hands on the table, his tone softening. Captain, this is humanity's last line of defense. If this mission fails, I hope you understand what's at stake. Mason's face hardened with determination. I do, sir. My team and I are fully aware of the risks, and we're ready to take them. If this is Earth's last stand, we'll give it everything we have. The room fell into a somber silence, the weight of Carter's words sinking in. This mission would be a gamble with stakes higher than any of them had ever faced. For a moment, even General Roberts looked uncharacteristically solemn, his steely demeanor softened by the enormity of the task ahead. Dr. Fisher broke the silence, his voice hesitant but hopeful. Captain, if you do succeed in disrupting their systems, do you have an extraction plan? Mason nodded. The Vanguard will remain cloaked and ready to retrieve us once the charges are set. After we detonate the EMPs, we'll have only minutes to evacuate before the Zather recover. Timing will be everything. Roberts placed a firm hand on Mason's shoulder. Then Godspeed, Captain. Bring our people home. As Mason turned to leave, his mind raced with the details he'd need to address before launch. He and his team would need to synchronize every step, every breath, to avoid detection. The Zather might be formidable, but if they expected Earth to simply surrender, they would soon realize their mistake. After Mason left, General Roberts, Dr. Fisher, and Ambassador Carter remained, a tense quiet settling over them. Dr. Fisher spoke first, his voice carrying a note of worry. Do you think he stands a chance, General? Roberts watched the closed door through which Mason had exited. If anyone does, it's him. Captain Mason is the finest operative we have. A man who thinks 10 steps ahead and isn't afraid to risk everything when it counts. Ambassador Carter let out a deep sigh, his eyes fixed on the polished wood of the table. If this plan works, we may finally have a way to level the field. But if it fails, well, there will be no time for regrets. They exchanged glances, each man quietly grappling with the enormity of the mission. Every part of them wanted to believe in Mason's success, but they were all seasoned enough to know that belief alone wouldn't win this fight. Meanwhile, down in the launch bay, Mason was briefing his team on the plan. Each operative listened in silence, their expressions focused, knowing this was more than just another mission. It was Earth's final hope. Mason's voice was calm as he went over the intricate details, the exits, the timing, the potential points of failure. All right, gentlemen, he said at last, looking each man in the eye. "The Zathar think they can control us, that we're predictable and easy to conquer. Let's show them just how wrong they are." The team nodded, their faces set with determination. They knew they might not return, but they would go down fighting, defiant to the last. As Mason stepped onto the platform of the Vanguard, he felt the full weight of his responsibility, but also a fierce surge of purpose. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had his resolve. With a final look at his men, he gave the signal. The countdown had begun. The Vanguard glided silently through the vacuum of space, its experimental cloaking technology holding steady as it approached the Zathar command ship. Inside the ship, Captain Daniel Mason and his team of 5 elite operatives prepared themselves in absolute silence, each man focused on the mission ahead. They were deep behind enemy lines, threading their way through the formidable alien fleet with only thin walls and the darkness of space shielding them from discovery. As the massive, sleek silhouette of the Zathar command ship came into view, Mason held up a hand, signaling his men to ready their equipment. Dr. Fisher's EMP charges were primed and attached securely to their belts, each man well aware of the importance of these devices. The plan was straightforward but fraught with peril. They would infiltrate the command ship, plant the charges in strategic locations around the core, and escape before detonation. Every second counted. The Vanguard hummed quietly as it docked with the alien vessel. Mason took one last glance at his team, meeting each of their gazes. There was determination, fear, and something else, an unspoken understanding that this mission could very well be their last. He nodded to them, and they returned it, a silent oath of solidarity. Without another word, they activated their suits' magnetic boots and moved into the Zathar ship. The interior of the command ship was sleek and ominous, filled with strange, pulsing lights that seemed to sense their presence. The air was thick, the unfamiliar atmosphere pressing in on them as they made their way down narrow corridors lined with alien symbols and unfamiliar machinery. Mason's pulse quickened as they approached the core chamber. Every instinct told him they were intruders in a space designed to keep enemies at bay. At last, they reached a massive chamber that seemed to hum with energy, the command core. Mason's breath caught. It was more imposing than they had anticipated, a swirling mass of lights and cables that looked almost alive, as if it were aware of their intrusion. He signaled his men to fan out, planting the EMP charges around the core in carefully calculated positions. The alien technology emitted a low, eerie hum that reverberated through the room, amplifying the tension in the air. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Mason's eye. He turned, and his heart skipped a beat as he saw a squad of Zathar soldiers entering the chamber, their dark eyes glinting with the cold precision of beings bred for war. They moved silently, their gaze shifting in unison as they noticed the intruders. Mason gritted his teeth, instinctively raising his weapon. There was no time for retreat. The showdown had begun. "Go loud," he barked, and his men sprang into action. Blasts erupted in the chamber, their guns releasing volleys of energy rounds that lit up the darkness. The Zathar soldiers were swift and deadly, but Mason's team fought with a ferocity born of desperation. He dodged a plasma shot that seared past his shoulder, the heat intense enough to singe his suit. He took aim, firing back with pinpoint accuracy, and one of the alien soldiers fell with a hiss, its armor sparking as it hit the floor. EMP charges set. One of his men shouted over the din, securing the last device against a metal beam beside the core. "Good. Fall back to extraction point," Mason ordered, firing another shot at an advancing soldier. His team moved with practiced precision, retreating in controlled bursts while covering one another. But the Zathar forces were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Mason's heart pounded as he realized the intensity of the resistance. If they didn't detonate the EMPs soon, they'd be overwhelmed. As they reached the corridor leading back to the Vanguard, Mason activated his communicator. "General Roberts, this is Mason. We're at the extraction point. Prepare for EMP detonation on my mark." A burst of static crackled before Robert's voice came through, laced with urgency. "Copy that, Captain. We're standing by." Mason watched his men board the Vanguard, each one injured in some way but alive. He was the last to climb aboard, covering their retreat as the Zather soldiers closed in. With a final glance at the enemy, he activated the EMP charges. "Detonate now." The charges exploded in a blinding flash, sending waves of electromagnetic disruption surging through the command ship. The hum of alien technology sputtered and fell silent, and the Zather soldiers stumbled, momentarily frozen as their systems faltered. Mason felt the Vanguard shudder as its engines roared to life, the ship peeling away from the command vessel just as the effects of the EMP rippled through the fleet. From the viewport, Mason watched as confusion spread among the Zather ships, their formations breaking as they struggled to recalibrate. Communication lines faltered, and several vessels began to drift unresponsive. Mason allowed himself a small, grim smile. They had struck a blow, a powerful one that would buy Earth precious time. But the victory was bittersweet. He knew the Zather would recover soon, and their wrath would be terrible. This mission had only delayed the inevitable, but it had also given humanity something they hadn't had before, a sliver of hope. As the Vanguard raced back toward Earth, Mason leaned back, his adrenaline finally ebbing. His team, battered but alive, exchanged weary nods, the unspoken relief shared between them. They had done the impossible. They had defied the Zather, disrupted their plans, and survived. Mason's thoughts turned to the next phase. They had bought time, but more battles lay ahead. They had shown the Zather that humanity would not submit without a fight. He took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was only the beginning of their resistance, a first act of defiance in a war that would test the very limits of human resilience. Turning to his team, Mason spoke with quiet determination. "Get some rest, men. We're not finished yet." The Vanguard streaked across the stars, heading back to Earth, leaving behind the flickering chaos of the Zather fleet.